as Sagar was saying, have traveled extensively, but part of the aspect that is most precious that happens as we do that is that we make true and deep friends wherever we travel. And so for many of you now, we have seen you many years in a row and have a very deep sense of bonding and a sense of family. I want to thank all of you who made this hall so beautiful. The flowers coming in were just exquisite. I used to say that no place in India had flowers like Chennai, but now I'm going to have to revise that thought. And so I don't want to start a competition between you all, but nonetheless, the flowers here are very, very beautiful. And the flowers spring from the Spirit. If the Spirit isn't beautiful, then there isn't much outward expression of them. Today, of course, as you know, is Gandhiji's birthday. And he was such a model of power and proper behavior for all of the world. There are so many things that we not only can learn from his life, but have learned, the world has learned from his life. But I would like to talk about some of the essence of that as I see it, because one can think about a person or study his life in a historical way, but that isn't really what is going on, because Gandhiji, in the last life that he had, was someone else. And we don't know what his story was in that life. But that same soul, probably relatively quickly, because a soul with that power and that magnitude has a mission that they're doing in order to help people. Master, in his beautiful poem, said, "I will return again and again with bleeding feet, if need be, as long as one stray brother is left wandering by the wayside." So these great souls, these great Mahatmas, come with a mission always to help us. And so, as I say, we can study Gandhi's life and the different phases of what he did in this time, but that doesn't go to the essence of who that soul was, nor to the essence of what God was doing through that soul. Because as the soul gets more advanced and greater in their consciousness, greater in their connection with God, there ceases to be the thought that they are doing anything. There ceases to be the thought that they are separate from God, that they are acting, that there comes a time and a point at which the unity that they feel with God and with other people becomes complete, and therefore there is no possibility even in the mind of the thought of separation or of I am doing this arising. Now, I don't know whether Gandhiji had arrived at that level of consciousness at all, or not, but we do know that he was a great Mahatma, a great soul that came into this world to help not only uplift those around him, but to uplift a whole country, and through his example, uplift the whole world. Some great people in America have become great because they have studied what Gandhi did in his lifetime. But let me touch on a few aspects of his greatness as I see it that apply to us. Yoganandaji said in several different ways in prayers and teachings, but basically, Lord, help me to understand the hidden laws of the universe and help me to align my life by those hidden laws, so that I might live in complete harmony and complete attunement with your consciousness. And that, the essence of that prayer, the extension of that prayer, is what I see as the essence of Gandhi. He understood the hidden laws that are not so hidden that we can't discover them. They're there to be discovered, and the great saints come and they talk about them. Patanjali talked about them. Jesus talked about them. Babaji talks about them. All the great masters talk about these laws of the universe, that we have the choice to align our lives according to those laws, or because God has given us free will, we have the choice to not align our lives. A very simple one of the most important to Gandhi, was nonviolence. Everyone in this world has the choice to align his life by the principle of nonviolence. He also, or she also, has the potential to align with the opposite of that, either in action or in thought or in words. Most of the world does not choose, most of the people of the world do not choose to align their lives according to the principles of nonviolence. And so what we see as the result of that is a world that is in conflict. One person with another person, one family with other families, or within that family's business conflict, national conflict. It goes on and on. So conflict, but conflict does not come out of itself. Conflict is the result of a heart that has not aligned itself with the principle, the hidden principle of nonviolence. And so, as I say, this principle is clarified enough so that it's there as a choice, but not so much that God imposes upon us, because we have to make the choice with our own free will to align ourselves with these hidden laws of God. And if we do, on a personal basis, even a little bit of the practice, as it says in the Gita, even a little bit of the practice of this inward religion, meditation, could be defined as aligning ourselves with God's consciousness, and therefore aligning ourselves with God's laws as they are extended into His creation of mind. And so if we align ourselves with those laws, even in meditation, even a little practice of that begins with changing our own consciousness and our own heart. Even a little practice of meditation will free you as an individual from dire fears and colossal sufferings. So what that also is saying is that if you act as an ego, act as an individual out of harmony with God's laws, you are going to end up, as a result of those actions, living in fear. Fear springs always and must spring from the ego. And if you live a life that emphasizes the ego is by its very nature impermanent, and by its very nature without power, or with very little power. And therefore those who live according to the laws of the ego and the laws of competition and violence always live at some level a life of fear. Those who live a life in attunement with God's laws gradually fear disappears. And there's it even extends to this structure of the brain. As we meditate, the energy coming to the prefrontal lobe strengthens that, and there we have thoughts of nonviolence, discrimination that allows us to have a greater connection with people, to feel our unity, to feel happiness, to feel a sense that we're all one, all working together. And as the energy comes there, it comes away from the primitive parts of the brain where fear resides. So it isn't just kind of woo-woo science. They now are able to show that there are actual physical ramifications of these teachings that we're talking about. But coming back to Gandhiji's life, so if we do even a little practice of aligning our consciousness with God, it takes away our fear and it takes away our suffering. That doesn't mean that the karma is going to change necessarily, because we have sent out energy in the past and that karmic repercussion is coming back. So we may go through the same karma. If we're needing karmically to have cleansing through a disease, then that disease may come still. It's not that God takes these things away, but He takes the suffering away. He takes this sense of fear and loss and the inability to deal with life as it comes to us. All of these come even from a little practice of aligning ourselves with the laws of the universe. Then, as we do that in greater and greater a flow of energy, that's why this simple little ceremony that we did, purification ceremony, symbolically is so important. These beautiful ceremonies, arati and yagyas, and this little modern yagya of the purification ceremony, they have real power because they align themselves with the flow of truth, with the flow of God's consciousness. And so this simple little ceremony is, I seek purification by the grace of God. And by that we align our individual consciousness, we attune it with God in the form of a master, the one that we have chosen. And then we respond. The master says, open your heart to me and I will enter and take charge of your life. Opening our heart, that's where the likes and dislikes arise. The anahat chakra, the chitta resides there. And so by aligning our hearts with the master, then he is able to guide our lives. He is able to help align us with the laws of the universe, the laws of God. Laws is really it's almost like it's a harsh word, you must obey the law. It's really, we're aligning ourselves with the love of God, the joy of God, the peace of God. We're aligning with these great principles and great gifts. And so, as we do that with a little more powerful flow of energy, then we become a force for not just ourselves, but for others around us. As a person becomes aligned more powerfully with something like nonviolence, then nonviolence, his magnetism vibrates on that wavelength, and people around him become nonviolent. Animals become nonviolent. Master was able through love to tame tigers. Sri Yukteswar played with cobras. So as we align with these truths, the universe around us begins to change a little bit. And then as that becomes stronger and stronger, you have a great Mahatma like Gandhi who comes and in the midst of enormous conflict, enormous difficulties, is so powerful in that consciousness that it's as if he bends the mindscape of the country around him. And nonviolence begins to spread and it becomes a force that's powerful. How did, the British had been here for several centuries and they had taken over the country. How did one little man weighing hardly 100 pounds defeat that whole vast army? But here's the great secret. He not only defeated the British, but he will go on and defeat army after army after army. Ones that he has never even come in contact with because of the power of the example that he set. And all of the great masters, they set a powerful example because the reason that they come into this world is, as it says in the Gita, where darkness increases and virtue declines, I incarnate in order to destroy evil and uplift consciousness. And so during this holy season, where the essence of all holy events is the entrance of light into the world, the entrance of an avatar into the world, the entrance of God into the world in some manner or another. And the individual examples are precious, but the repeating pattern of light entering into a culture, light entering into a nation, or light entering into a single heart and a single mind in order to change and uplift that and to increase the harmony of the universe. That's very powerful. And so to come together, as Brahmachari Sadhar said, to come together as a spiritual family where we can exchange friendship and joy and non-violence and love for each other, kindness for each other. It's a very, very beautiful and very precious gift. And so I thank you all for being part of that gift to Devi Ji and me.
Namaste, everyone. I too want to thank you all for coming today. And we had a wonderful meditation together and a very beautiful Kriya ceremony last night. We were saying afterwards that part of the reason that I think we all felt so uplifted at the Kriya initiation last night was there was such deep devotion to Master amongst everyone who was there, and it draws the grace of our Guru when we come together with that devotion. But interestingly, Master initiated Gandhiji into Korea when Master returned to India, 1935-36. And so, celebrating Gandhi's birthday, he is also a fellow Kriya bound with all of us. And someone asked Master, did Gandhi continue his practice of Kriya? And Master said he was a man of his word. He took the vow that he would practice it faithfully and regularly, and so he did. And so another aspect, point of inspiration that we can take away from Gandhi's life, and it applies to all of us, was to be a man of his word, to be a person of his word. If we make a commitment to the spiritual life, we have to put that as an important priority in our life. It's not enough to come and come to a class, come to a banquet, and then go back and forget it all. We have to, just as Gandhi made the liberation of India, the freeing of India, the top priority in his life. He sacrificed everything for that, didn't he? Family, freedom, health, name, or acceptance by the society at large. He gave up everything. But he had that focus of his whole life force to free India. That was the mission God gave to him. And what mission has God given to all of us? To free ourselves. Master said, the time for knowing God has come. And he said, everything else can wait, but the search for God cannot wait. So we can draw from Gandhi's life. If he could make his life an example of focused energy, focused life force, setting that as top priority, personal sacrifice. We don't find God by saying, God, I love you, but oh, I want that new car. It doesn't work that way. Yes, we can get a new car. I'm not saying we have to deprive ourselves of material things, but always in the back of our mind, we need to remember, why am I here and what is my goal in life? Gandhi affirmed that every waking moment. Why am I here and what is my goal in life? Everything else took a back seat. And so we need to ask ourselves, Jyotish and I have had, and Devarshi Dhyana, have had the great good karma of watching thousands of people come to the spiritual path. Some stay, some grow, some become saintly, and others kind of hit a plateau, you don't see much change, and others drift away and turn their back. Don't be one of the later two groups. Don't be those who drift away. Don't be those who come and go. Make it a core priority in your life. That's how transformation happens. We saw Swamiji for decades, serving Master, building this Ananda Sangha worldwide. He too sacrificed everything for that. His health, everything. But look what he was able to accomplish. God through him, Guru through him. And this is, in a way, the gift that these great ones give to us. It isn't only that India was freed. It isn't only that this wonderful spiritual work, Ananda Sangha, was created in Master's name. It's the example of how to focus our life force and accomplish something that's important to us. And this can be done. The teachings of our Guru, of our line of Gurus, they've given us everything. The energization, the meditation techniques, the example of service to others. We have all the tools. We just have to use them to the best of our ability and say, this is the priority. And the more we do this, honestly, I know from our own life, the easier it becomes. Because you've weeded out your garden, and you've weeded out all the things that say, oh, but what about my ego, and what about this, and what about security, and name, and importance. You've pulled out those things long ago. And all you want now is to develop the flowers of devotion, love for Guru, service for Guru. We can all do this. The people that have come to Ananda, they're not different. They're ordinary people in a certain sense. But what's different is that they've received something. They've received from God and Guru the ability to transform their lives. I was thinking about this recently, because the spiritual life is always unfolding understanding. And as Sagar mentioned, we came to Swamiji, to Master, when we were quite young. I was 22, I think Jyotish was 23. And I hadn't had any background in meditation, in yoga, in the teachings of India, in this lifetime. I think once I began, it was very familiar. And just to share, those of us from the West who are serving in India, we feel more at home here than we do in the West, because this is really who we are. In the West, you have to kind of play a different role, and that's all right, but we can come here and feel more at home. But so I came and I met Swami Kriyananda, and he taught us the spiritual path. But all of a sudden, from being a college student, studying, taking exams, writing papers, within a couple of weeks, I was a complete vegetarian. I was meditating several hours every day. I was serving the hours that I wasn't meditating. I really didn't have any material possessions. I had a little sleeping bag on the ground under a tree. And I had come from a middle-class family. I had comforts around me. But the marvel of it was, it all seemed totally natural. And I never thought about it. Why is that? And just recently I began to understand that was what Swami gave us, the Master gave us. The grace to make the spiritual path the top priority in our life. I thought I had done it. How could I be? How could I have made that switch seamlessly? It wasn't in me. But Swami gave us that. Just watching him, being in his presence, meditating with him, listening to him chant. I remember the first time I heard him chant. I'd never heard chanting in my life. But it was like, this is the most beautiful music I've ever heard. And so the Guru comes, and that's why the purification, in a way, it's an encapsulation of the whole spiritual path. I seek purification, I seek personal transformation. And then the Master says, open your heart, I'll change you. You can't do it yourself. And then we receive the grace, and then we understand by the grace of our Masters, we are transformed. And so we have been given the grace of our great Master. We have been given the tools. We have been given Satsang together in a beautiful family. We so enjoy the children when they come. And maybe they cry, but they're just souls who want to be a part of the light. We're very happy that they come. And so, for all of us, remember, everything else can wait. Truly it can wait. But the search for God cannot wait. I had a very beautiful mother, passed away some years ago. She was a spiritual woman and a wise woman, but she didn't apply herself spiritually. And at the end of her life, she said to me, I always thought when I would get old, I would be wise, but it didn't happen. And I felt badly for her, because I thought you could have done more. I would send her the autobiography, I would send her all these things, and she was embarrassed of them, and put them away in the back of a closet. She could have done more. Don't let your life end like that. Take the autobiography. Someone was just telling me, I have it right by my bed where I sleep at night. I said, so do I. Don't forget. Use the examples of the great ones to model your life, to shape your consciousness. And this can be the change, not only for you, but the change that the world so desperately needs now. It's painful to be alive now, to see the confusion in the world and the hatred and the violence. It's painful. But what can we do about it? we can begin to change our consciousness and make it more godly. And by doing that, we begin to make a change in the consciousness of our planet. Let's unite in this effort. Let's, in celebrating these spiritual, the return of the light, and the worshiping of the Divine Mother, and of worshiping the great saint Mahatma Gandhi, let us say, I will use these as fuel to fire my devotion, as fuel to say, God, in this life, I will find you. And if we can do this, this is our gift for our own freedom and our gift for the world. It's very, very worthwhile way to live your life. Everything else will go. Everything else can wait. That God's presence is always calling, eternally there. Come. Wake from your dark dreams of delusion. Come into the light. This is why I have come.
So before we end this satsang part, there are a few questions that devotees sent in. Jyotish and Devi, I gave them a printed list of those questions. They would answer them. I just want to add this, because I forgot to say it in the introduction, that Swami Kriyananda, he said that Nayaswamis Jyotish would be his spiritual successor. And so Nayaswamis Jyotish ji is also the Dharmacharya of Ananda Sangha. And since 2013, when Swamiji left his body, he has taken that role on. But Swamiji made that decision almost a decade at least before. And for 20 years or so before Swamiji's passing, he already had Jyotish ji and Devi ji doing this role of being the spiritual directors of Ananda worldwide. In fact, I remember this was in Swamiji's house in Pune. Swamiji was there in his body. He was giving the satsang, and Jyotish ji and Devi ji were both there. And I think there was some sort of a class series on leadership happening. And Jyotish ji and Devi ji were asking Swamiji questions, and Swamiji was answering. And after answering one particular question, Swamiji paused, and he looked at Jyotish ji and said, Jyotish, you think so much like me that you even look like me. And so feel that they are acting on Swamiji's behalf. They really are. So these questions, how would you like us to read it off the list and then answer?
So we'll do a few questions, but we'll do them relatively quickly because we have more fun things than just talking. We have presents and we have food and we have friendships. So question number one is, how do I overcome the existential angst? I think we've been talking about that. Existential angst comes from the ego. So everything you do to lessen the ego will make you feel less anxious about whether you're going to exist or not, until you get to the point where you have no question whatsoever that you're not going to exist. The essence of our teaching is that we're eternal. We're simply sparks of God. And so the closer you come to recognizing yourself as the soul, the less existential angst there is. The more you go toward thinking of your ego, you're just going to be able to increase that until it becomes nearly unbearable.
I'll just answer briefly. Remember, Master said that the yogi should stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. And the more you practice meditation, the more you will find anxiety and fear and uncertainty. It just falls away. You're not even aware that you're not nervous anymore, that you're not worried anymore. You just know that you're part of God, and everything that happens has His hand in it. this isn't just an affirmation, it becomes a state of consciousness.
One last tip, everything that happens to you, everything, say thank you, God, because it comes for your own freedom. And so that attitude of gratitude will lift your consciousness. Okay, how to deepen the experience of the spiritual eye? By maintaining longer and deeper concentration at the forehead, especially after the practice of Kriya Yoga. But any of our techniques will help awaken the flow of energy in an upward direction. What the spiritual eye is, aside from the beautiful representation of it in the flowers at the back, if you didn't notice that as you came in, take a look. We had our photos taken by it. It's so glorious.
And the people who created that, please stand so we can applaud. One more.
So what the spiritual eye is actually when we withdraw our energy in deep meditation, the energy comes into the Sushumna. And as that energy from the Sushumna comes up and moves up powerfully in an upward moving direction, the spiritual eye, it comes up to the medulla, and then it actually projects that energy on the screen of our forehead. So we're seeing the rings, the 3 rings of the Sushumna when we see the spiritual eye. So how to increase that? By increasing the interiorization of your consciousness and the upward flow of the direction of it. And the more you get distracted and your energy moves outward and you think of this, you think of that, the monkey mind intrudes, then the more the energy goes out of that interior spine. So just the deeper and deeper practice of our techniques will bring about that experience.
Just briefly to add, those of you who have Kriya Yoga initiation, when you do the Jyoti Mudra at the end, we should have said this last night, perhaps we did, don't have tension there when you're trying to look at the spiritual eye. Just relax, feel that your awareness is resting there, not that you're striving to see something that's outside of yourself, it's within yourself. So just try to relax at that point and rest there for as long as you can keep it focused.
Next question is devotion a grace? Yes, it is. Is there any way to enhance it by practicing it? How to create intense devotion like Master or Swamiji by giving it more of your concentration, more of your energy. So you have to practice devotion more often during the day with little things like a chant, or when you see a photo of Master or of some image of God, don't just kind of glance and walk on. Actually send a ray from your heart of devotion, of thank you, God, of offering yourself. So the more often you practice devotion, the stronger that habit and flow of energy will come. Then when you're feeling it, try to deepen it so that you don't just feel it lightly, but that as that energy progresses, that you give a lot of your energy to it. Remember the story of the magic carrot that Master talked about, where some of you may not have heard, but he said there was this woman who never ever did anything kind in her whole life. And so when she was being judged at the end of her life, the book of her life for the evil deeds was filled, every little page written on. but the book of good deeds was blank page after blank page after blank page. And at one point, 20 pages into it was a footnote to nothing on the page, but a footnote that said one time she had given a rotten carrot to a beggar. And that was her only good deed. So she went to hell. But that one good deed was a magic carrot. And so that magic carrot, she grabbed onto that, and it began to rise and bring her up toward heaven. But other people in hell, seeing this, grabbed onto her legs, and then there was a long string of people being drawn up by that single magic carrot. And she couldn't stand it, so she let go of it so she could shake them off, and then fell. So, let devotion be your magic carrot. Grab onto it and hold onto it, and don't let restless thoughts that are going to come up with you, don't let them pull you back down. But yes, you can increase your devotion, and all we can do is work directionally with that. Don't compare yourself to Master. Don't compare yourself to Swamiji. They've been holding on to their devotion and doing practices to deepen it for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. When Master told Swamiji at the beginning of his discipleship that he needed to get more devotion, he began to chant 3 or 4 hours a day and practice devotion in his meditation. If you have that kind of energy and willpower that have been brought from past lives, then by all means work on it, but work on it as strongly as you can. And the direction is much more important than how much. You know, a glass of water, how big is a glass of water? To an ant, it's a huge swimming pool that the ant can drown in. To an elephant, it's hardly anything worth even looking at. So your devotion is big or small according to your perspective on it. Your job is to keep increasing it. Can you read? Here, I'll read it for you. Okay. But 2 more.
Is it okay to ask for saving from a catastrophe, or better to ask for the strength to deal with it? Well, really neither. It's better to say, God, whatever you want. I don't have a choice in the matter. So if a catastrophe comes, that's your will. If I can avoid it, that's your will. So again, it ties into the subject of devotion, because the more we can really begin to trust that everything that comes, even the very difficult things that come, they're all for a reason. They're all from God's love. He's trying to bring us His freedom. You know, once someone said to Master at the end of his life, he was taking on a lot of people's karma, and he had terrible pains in his legs, and he couldn't walk. And one of his disciples said to him, how cruel of Divine Mother, after all your love for her, to treat you like this. And Master got very strong. He said, don't you dare criticize Divine Mother. Whatever she gives, I take. And so even when the hard things come, just say, this is part of the journey. You know, some years ago, we were at a Kriya initiation with Swami Ananda, and as each of us came up for the blessing, he blessed us. And then afterwards, there were a small group of us standing around him, and he said, I had a most unusual experience during the blessing of each one of you. I could feel the unique pathway through which each one of you would find moksha, different for each one. So we need to understand, you look at one person's life and you say, oh, everything has gone easy. They must have God's grace. You look at someone else's life, catastrophe after catastrophe, and you think, oh, what bad karma. We can't see. We don't know. Swamiji said, someone once asked him, what is good karma, what is bad karma? He said, good karma is what brings you closer to God. It may involve suffering, but if it brings you closer to God, that's good karma. What is bad karma? Maybe winning the lottery could be bad karma, winning a big prize, if it just makes you more worldly. And so, what to pray for? Pray that we surrender to God's will in all things in our life.
The last one, because then we have presents, we have food.
When we say presents, we're giving you
We're giving you presents. Then we have food, and then we have the most important thing of all, a birthday cake. So we have to get on to that. As mentioned in the new path, why did Master ask disciples to mostly be in silence, remain in the self rather than too much in others' company, and not to hug others? To stay in the self allows you to feel more clearly the presence of Divine Mother. As the farther we get out, just like a light, the farther you get away from the source of that light, the dimmer that light becomes. The farther we get away from the source of the divine within ourselves, the dimmer that sense of connection becomes. And so Master would often tell people, don't speak. And when he was in a very high state, it was painful for him to have people speak. At one point he had been, he would take occasional vacations with a very, very high soul, mother and daughter, Kamala Silva. And he went day after, they lived by the ocean, he went day after day to the beach, and the driver would come back and say, he's the craziest person I ever saw. All he does, he goes out there and he sits on the sand, he doesn't move a muscle, he's there all day long, and then he comes back and I drive him home. He doesn't even go swimming. Anyway, Master was in Samadhi for day after day. And at one point he came back and he said, when I'm in this state, don't speak of anything except God. And so in that state, you don't want to be drawn in any outward direction. And so all of these are just examples of things that draw the mind a little more outward, a little more distant from our own source. So obviously we live in a society and we want to share, we want to be kind to each other, we want to be friendly to each other. All of that is good and beautiful. But even in the midst of that, try to feel that you're coming from your own center to the other person's center.
And I'll just add, once Ananda had a business that we started in California. It was a health food store and restaurant. And people would come and we had nice organic vegetarian food. And once we went there with Swamiji, and the staff was very gracious, very kind to everyone. And then, but Swami, he was so perceptive, subtle in his perception. He had called all the staff around him, and he said, you're doing a good job, but you're being a friend to people's personalities. You have to be a divine friend to their soul nature. So it doesn't mean that we're cold or Ananda is not like some other spiritual groups that we're very distant. And in fact, people tell us that all the time. Your teachers are so accessible. Well, that's Swami's way. We weren't aloof and withdrawn, and I don't want to get involved with you. We care about people. We care about people's lives. But at the same time, that friendship has to be rooted in God, not just personality. And so I think that's the important thing. To try to, when you relate to each other, try to relate to the God of the other person, not just the superficial things. And that's what really creates a true Sangha, divine friendship in Dharma. So, should we do presents? Okay. So we have a Diwali present for each one. Okay. This is something that, with the help of Dharmini, Nayaswamis, Dharmini, and Dharmaraj, they help us. And we have a calendar for the coming year, and it's a desk calendar that stands up. You have to fold it. And each month is one of Jyotish's paintings. So we want to give this.
Just to demonstrate, there's a little element at the base. If you hold that so that it's flat, then it will sit upright on your desk, and then.
And that says, "The Master's love, Jyotish, Nayaswamis, Jyotish and Devi," and then there's a page for each one.
Okay, so.